My family abandoned me at the airport, so I cut them off financially and watched their lives fall apart. I've never shared something like this publicly, but after what happened in the last few months, I felt the need to get it off my chest. I know this is a long story, but there's a lot to explain, and I can't leave anything important out. I never imagined I'd be the guy who cuts all ties with his family, but after what happened 5 years ago, I really had no other choice. It all started with my sister Hallie, 29, who was always the perfect child. Impeccable grades, an enviable job, an ideal husband, everything you could want. Meanwhile, Mike was always the son who couldn't seem to do anything right. Despite trying my best every day, my story goes back to my first real job after college. Nothing fancy, just a construction management position at a local company. Although it was a solid job with good prospects and I was proud, my parents, Bob, 58, and Linda, 56, barely acknowledged my achievement. When I announced I got the job, my father simply said, "It's about time you started pulling your weight." Whereas when Hallie got her first marketing job fresh out of school, they threw her a party, bought her a new laptop, and celebrated her success. This inequality repeated itself throughout my life. During high school, I made the baseball team, but my father skipped the games to attend Hallie's debate tournaments. When I finished college, the first in the family to get a degree, by the way, I was disappointed to hear that my parents could barely stand to sit through the ceremony. For Hallie's graduation, they rented an entire restaurant to celebrate. Even so, I was always willing to help them when they needed it. The situation worsened when my father retired early at 57 due to back problems. Although his physical limitations never stopped him from playing golf, his retirement brought financial problems. My parents started worrying about losing the house, and I discreetly arranged through my financial advisor a system where I covered $800 of their mortgage payment monthly. They believed the bank was being cooperative, unaware it was me who was paying. It wasn't the only hidden expense. Hallie was involved in another complicated situation. Her husband, Jason, a finance guy with a haughty attitude, always looked down on me for working with my hands. It turned out his credit was terrible, and at one point they begged me to co-sign for their BMW X5. They forgot to make the payments on time every 3 months, which forced me to cover those payments to prevent my own credit from being affected. They never knew about these omissions, as the bank contacted me directly. The biggest outlay, however, was my parents' health insurance. My father's retirement package didn't include adequate coverage. So, to protect them, I decided to add them as dependents on my premium work plan, arguing that they resided with me part-time. This cost me an extra $650.50 a month for years, and they had no idea I was bearing that expense. The breaking point came during the last days of my grandfather, who was battling cancer. I was the one visiting him daily after work, while Hallie barely showed up once a week due to her work commitments. When my grandfather passed away, he left me his classic '67 Mustang, the car we had worked on together for years, and which meant the world to me. However, my family vehemently opposed the car going to me. My father, with a strident voice, claimed the Mustang should go to Hallie, whom he considered his favorite, and my mother insisted that she needed it more, despite her driving a brand new BMW bought by her husband. I made it clear that the car was mine and the decision was made. The situation took an even darker turn. 2 days after the funeral, I discovered my father tampering with the Mustang's brakes, not adjusting them, but deliberately loosening the brake line while the vehicle was parked at his house. I confronted him on the spot, but he just shrugged, claiming he was only checking the brake fluid level, and that I was overreacting. I decided to take the car to a friend's workshop, and the mechanic confirmed that the brake line had been intentionally altered, enough for the vehicle to fail on the highway. That was the last straw. They literally tried to endanger my life over a car. That night, without further ado, I packed my things, got in the Mustang, and drove 500 miles to Colorado. I changed my number and blocked all my family members on social media. Without leaving a forwarding address, I simply disappeared from the life of that toxic family. Despite everything, I continued paying the mortgage and health insurance for my parents, perhaps out of guilt or a sense of responsibility I couldn't yet abandon, but making sure they didn't know those payments were coming from me. For 3 years in Denver, I built a decent life. I was promoted twice at the construction company and started dating Tara, a 30-year-old nurse who turned out to be an invaluable partner in this new chapter. The only family connection I maintained was with my cousin Jake, 30, who always had the ability to see the truth behind others' behavior. In fact, he moved to Denver a year after I did, partly to get away from the family drama. Life finally seemed free of complications. However, the tranquility was disturbed last December. Jake told me my parents had been asking about me, and that they somehow seemed to have changed. He mentioned they missed my presence. According to him, my father had suffered a health scare, nothing serious, just high blood pressure, which made him reevaluate his priorities. At first, I refused to listen to them and even told Jake to expletive off. But little by little, I started to think that maybe it was worth hearing what they had to say. So, shortly after New Year's, I decided to unblock their numbers and sent a simple message to the family chat. "Hey, it's Mike." It was nothing more than that, but my phone exploded with calls and messages. My mother crying, my father expressing how much he missed me, and even Hallie adopting a lost friend attitude. Gift baskets arrived at my apartment, and according to Jake, they had kept my address. They even invited me to visit them. Cautiously, I started having short calls every 2 weeks, updating them. I noticed changes. My father no longer made sarcastic comments. My mother showed genuine interest in my work instead of diverting the conversation to Hallie. Even Hallie herself seemed less self-centered, asking about Tara and showing real affection. Things progressed when they started planning a family vacation to Japan for the new year as a way to win me back. My father insisted it was his grand gesture to make up for lost time. Although I was initially skeptical, after months of reconnecting and seeing signs of change, I decided to give them a chance. So, after months of renewed contact, a 14-day trip to Japan was finally organized, including stops in Tokyo, Kyoto, Hot Springs, and more. For weeks, I exchanged messages with my parents and Hallie about the trip details, and my father emphasized that it was his way of welcoming me back into the family. I decided to take the chance despite my doubts. I even managed to get 2 weeks off work, even though my boss wasn't very happy about it because of the importance of the project starting in January. Tara, on the other hand, couldn't join me because of her hospital shifts, but she was by my side, helping me pack and taking me to the airport. So there I was, in line at Denver International Airport, passport in hand, and the printed confirmation of the trip my father had sent. I had invested about $800 in new luggage and winter clothes for Japan, convinced that a new chapter was finally opening up for us. I arrived at the counter enthusiastically, but when the employee started entering my information into the computer, I noticed something was wrong. After a few minutes of typing, she frowned and informed me, "I'm sorry, sir, but your ticket has been canceled." I thought it was a mistake and asked her to check again, as the family reservation was under Robert Walsh. However, the screen showed that while the reservation for the flight to Tokyo existed, my ticket had been canceled the previous afternoon. With my stomach churning, I stepped away from the counter and immediately called my sister Hallie, who was in charge of all the flight details. Upon answering, I could barely tell her there was a problem with my ticket when, after a brief pause, I heard a giggle. "Seriously, did you think we'd enjoy having you there, Mike? This was Mom and Dad's idea. If you show up, you've failed the test." I remained silent while she continued, "You abandoned the family for years. Maybe Mom and Dad are desperate enough to forgive you, but Jason and I aren't. We just wanted to see if you'd actually show up. Have fun spending New Year's alone, loser." And she hung up. Surrounded by happy families excited about their vacations, I felt humiliated and completely alone in the middle of the airport. I tried to contact my parents. My calls went unanswered, and the text messages also went unanswered. An hour later, I finally received a message from my father. "Maybe this is for the best. We'll talk when you get back." With no apologies, no words of understanding, and Hallie sending me messages to downplay the importance, I understood that I had been the target of a cruel joke. With burning fury, I called Tara, who picked up my call and rushed to get me. During the Uber ride back to my apartment, confusion and pain mingled in my mind. Only 3 hours earlier, I had been excited about the idea of reconnecting with my family on what promised to be a dream vacation. Now I was returning home humiliated and alone, leaving behind 2 weeks of longed-for escape. Reviewing all the messages and emails related to the trip, something clicked inside me. Why had they shown so much interest in my work and finances in recent months? Why had my mom accidentally opened my bank statement? Or why had my dad insisted I add them to my accounts? Just in case. I realized with pain that they hadn't changed at all. They simply sought to regain access to my money. The whole Japan trip had been a ploy to drag me back into their web without any real interest in reconciling with me. What they didn't know was that since I distanced myself, I had thrived. I had been promoted to senior project manager, made smart investments, and was earning almost 6 figures annually. Meanwhile, according to Jake, my parents were facing serious financial difficulties after my father's early retirement and Jason's losses in a cryptocurrency scheme. It wasn't about loving family, but about loving what I could do for them. With a newfound perspective of taking advantage of my success, that night in my apartment, while my phone was flooded with messages from Hallie minimizing the matter with phrases like, "It's just a joke, don't be so sensitive," and assuring me they'd book me a seat on the next flight, something broke inside me. My parents, on the other hand, were still not communicating directly. That's when I made the final decision. I wrote to my cousin Jake, "You're wrong, they haven't changed. They just set up this whole deception. I'm fed up and I'm out for good." Jake responded immediately, and after listening to my story, he was silent for a moment before saying, "I didn't know, Mike. I also thought they had changed." Despite his words, I asked for his help. I needed to identify every financial link I still had with them so I could break it off completely. The process was relentless. I started by canceling the mortgage payment, calling my financial advisor to stop all transfers, and waiting for the bank to send the formal notification of termination of the special arrangement in a few months. Then I contacted the bank in charge of financing Hallie's BMW and requested to remove my name from the loan. The operator hesitated, informing me that without my credit backing, they would have to refinance at a rate almost twice as high, something that pleased me. I also revoked their authorization for payments and health matters. I managed to get HR to cancel my parents' coverage, alleging a change in my living situation, and explaining they no longer lived with me. I left nothing to chance. I went through all my accounts, canceled minor services, eliminated their access to my Netflix, Amazon Prime, and Spotify accounts, and even canceled the Costco membership that, ironically, my mother brags so much about for its good deals. I called the luxury hotel in Kyoto where they were staying and canceled the second week of the reservation, the reconnection gift I had paid for, with the intention of leaving them without accommodation halfway through their trip. The next day, my cousin Jake called me exclaiming, "Mike, you also closed the joint investment account." I was stunned. I didn't remember authorizing anything like that. It turned out that shortly after graduating, I opened an investment account that had grown to about $23,000, and my parents, without my consent, had managed to add their names. The bank manager, visibly uncomfortable, confirmed that my father had become a co-owner the previous year. The signature on the authorization form was identical to mine, but I had never signed anything like that. This discovery led me to file fraud charges, triggering a formal investigation. At the end of it all, I managed to recover more than $1,500 monthly in expenses that I had assumed for them, in addition to freeing up the $23,000 they tried to appropriate. That feeling of relief was immense, as if I had finally cut the last invisible ties that bound me to them. However, I knew the storm was yet to come. They would not accept my rejection so easily. Sure enough, about a week later, while they were enjoying their trip, messages started arriving. First, Hallie asked, "What did you do?" "The hotel says the reservation for next week has been canceled." I didn't answer immediately. Shortly after, my father sent another message. "We're having problems with health insurance. The pharmacy says we're no longer covered. Did you do this?" My only reply was a group message. "I hope you enjoy your family vacation without me. Consider this my final goodbye. Do not contact me again." I blocked their numbers before they could reply. That night, Jake called me to say, "They're coming home early." The hotel situation had upset them, and Hallie was panicking about the car payment, as, according to them, the bank was now demanding an extra $900 monthly. I replied, "Not my problem. Definitely not." Jake agreed but warned me that they were furious. Furious as if there were a nuclear explosion. My mother, between complaints, commented that my father had gone off the deep end, demanding that I pay. What is he going to do? Loosen the brake lines again? I thought, and I laughed, although the humor couldn't disguise the seriousness of the situation. They advised me to be careful, as they might show up at my house upon their return. Jake was right. I had to prepare for the inevitable confrontation. Therefore, I installed a Ring doorbell camera and 2 additional cameras monitoring both my parking space and the rear entrance of the apartment. I also made copies of all financial records showing the support I had provided them for years, in case they tried to invent a story to the extended family. I notified building security not to allow my family in without consulting me first. I even warned Tara to avoid unintentionally letting them in during my absence. For years, they had made me feel inadequate, making me believe I should be grateful for any glimpse of attention or approval. Now they were about to experience what it's like to be completely cut off. And to be honest, it felt good. 3 days later, I received a notification from the Ring camera. Someone was at the door. Upon checking the app, I confirmed they were there. My parents, Hallie and Jason, all angry and jet-lagged, in the hallway of my apartment. At first, I had no intention of opening, but then I thought, why not face the situation? I'm not afraid of these people anymore. So I let them in. My mother was the first to speak, exclaiming, "What's going on, Michael?" First, the hotel reservation, then the health insurance, and now the bank says they've canceled the mortgage agreement. Is this your way of getting revenge? I just laughed and replied, "No, I've simply decided to stop providing the financial support you never valued." My father, his face reddening to a purplish hue, retorted, "What are you talking about? We never received a single cent from you." That's when I pulled out the folder with all the receipts and documents, bank statements showing my contributions to the mortgage, health insurance policies listing them as dependents, records of Hallie's car payments, everything I had kept quiet about for 5 years, even after they tried to kill me over my grandfather's car. "And how did you repay me?" "By humiliating me at the airport." The argument became chaotic. My father denied everything. My mother cried, claiming they needed my help. Hallie insisted the airport thing was just a joke that got out of control. And Jason blurted out, "Look, we didn't know you were helping with the expenses. It's your fault for not telling us. The airport thing was just to teach you a lesson about abandoning your family." I approached him and said, "I left because you tampered with my brakes, and that could have cost me my life. What kind of family does something like that?" My mother tried to downplay the matter, suggesting we had all matured, but from my perspective, they were still the same selfish and manipulative people they always were. The only difference was that I was no longer their ATM. Hallie started crying, lamenting they were going to lose the house and that her car would be repossessed, claiming it was all my fault. The typical attitude of always positioning herself as the victim. I replied, "Maybe Jason shouldn't have spent your savings on cryptocurrencies if he considered himself a financial genius." At that precise moment, Jason lunged at me, but my father held him back, not so much to protect me but because he knew I'd be ready to press charges at any moment. "We're family," my father insisted one last time. "You can't just cut us off like this." And I replied, "Yes, I can and I have. You're not my family anymore. You're just people I used to know who treated me this way. Get out before I call the police." They left, but not without Hallie making one last attempt to provoke me with a, "You'll regret this when you have no one left." I replied, "I'd rather be alone than have you around." As I closed the door behind them, I felt a strange sense of peace, as if I was finally closing a chapter that should have ended years ago. Later that night, Jake called me again. Apparently, my parents and Hallie had been spreading the story to everyone in the family, trying to portray me as a financial abuser. Most didn't believe it, especially after Jake recounted what happened at the airport. What surprised me most was the support of my Aunt Carol, always close to my mother, who told her, "If you treat your son like that, what did you expect? Actions have consequences." Those words gave me extra validation. Just when it seemed the dust had settled, life threw me another surprise. About a month after the disaster in Japan, while having coffee before work one Thursday, my phone started ringing. It was my Uncle Frank, my father's brother, with whom I had always had a good relationship before the family conflict. "Mike, do you have a moment to talk?" he asked. For a moment I hesitated, thinking that perhaps another relative was trying to make me feel guilty to reconcile with my parents. "What is it, Frank?" I inquired. "Jake told me about the airport. It was really twisted. They truly manipulated you." Frank's voice sounded serious. "I know you probably don't want anything to do with the family right now, But I need to tell you something. Your father has been telling lies, claiming you had a mental breakdown and cut them off for no reason. That typical excuse of my father playing the victim didn't surprise me, as I knew the truth. Frank continued. Your father has always been jealous of you. You're too much like your grandfather who never thought Bob was good enough. Why do you think your grandfather left you the Mustang? Because in you he saw what he valued, not in your father. Bob never forgave any of them for that. Gradually, the pieces began to fall into place. The favoritism towards Hallie wasn't accidental, but the way my father took revenge on his own father through me, while my mother blindly followed his orders. Your grandfather used to tell me how proud he was of you for your perseverance, unlike your father, who always took the easy way out, Frank added. For almost an hour, he filled in the gaps in the family history that I was completely unaware of. At the end of the conversation, he made me a proposition. Get your revenge. Since your trip to Japan was ruined, why don't we go just us, you, me, Jake, and his son Chris using my work miles? The idea is perfect. Let's invite your parents and Hallie, but book their flights from a totally different airport, 5 hours away, so they experience their own medicine. The proposal, so Machiavellian, so perfect, closed a circle of revenge that seemed imminent. During the following weeks, I couldn't help but laugh as I watched Frank deploy his skills with a confidence bordering on theatricality. He called my parents and Hallie to tell them he wanted to heal the family rift by organizing a trip to Hawaii. According to him, they had to drive to Chicago to catch the flight, because although we lived near Denver, he argued that this was the only way to get direct flights, taking advantage of his miles. For our part, we booked our own tickets from Denver, scheduled to depart 2 days before them. On the day of the flight, Frank sent me a screenshot of a message from my father. Traffic is horrible, we might miss the flight. Can you call the airline? It was at that moment that I replied to Hallie with a "have a nice trip back, losers," and decided to block them all. We enjoyed an incredible week in Hawaii and only posted one photo online. The 4 of us at Ala Moana with the caption, "Best family vacation ever." Likes and comments poured in, except from my parents and Hallie. Later, my friend Chris texted me, "Dude, your sister is furious about the Hawaii thing. She spent last night ranting at a bar." And I thought, good for her. I was too busy enjoying paradise with people who truly cared about me. That trip was just what I needed to enjoy myself without having to walk on eggshells around toxic relatives. However, the tranquility vanished almost immediately upon returning to Denver. The feeling of renewal lasted barely 12 hours. The next morning, as I headed to my car to go to work, I found something that chilled me to the bone. My Mustang, the same one my grandfather had left me, and which we had spent countless hours restoring together, was wrecked in the parking lot. All 4 tires were slashed, all the windows were broken, and to top it off, someone had spray painted on the side in bright red letters, "You shouldn't have messed with our property." I immediately called the police, and while we waited, I remembered the security cameras I installed after Jake's warnings. I opened the app on my phone and, unable to believe what I was seeing, they confirmed my worst suspicions. At 3 a.m., the recording showed my parents and Hallie's husband, Jason, vandalizing my car. The video captured everything clearly. My father slashing the tires while my nervous mother watched around, Jason pouncing with a baseball bat to smash the windows, and Hallie with a defiant air, painting the message and taking a selfie next to her handiwork. For much of the day, I was at the police station. That same night, Frank showed up at my house after I called him upon seeing the images. His face flushed with fury. "These vindictive idiots," he muttered. Bob always had a bad temper, but this is literally criminal. The police arrived and mentioned they were considering felony charges. Meanwhile, Frank, with a sarcastic tone, commented, "Well, maybe they'll finally learn that actions have consequences." Not only did I file the police report, but, convinced by my Uncle Frank, I decided to send the recordings to the local news station in my parents' town. According to his exact words, "They love to pretend they're model citizens. Let's see how they like it when everyone finds out what they really are." Indeed, the station picked up the case with the headline, "Prominent local couple arrested for vandalizing son's car after family dispute." The next day, everyone in their small community social circle learned the shameful truth. My parents, those respectable and regular churchgoers, had behaved as if they were in a GTA video game. The situation worsened when they were arrested at the country club during Sunday brunch, before the astonished gaze of their friends, who, according to my Uncle Frank, through a golfing acquaintance, recorded every moment on their phones. The charges were serious: felony vandalism, intentional damage, and because they crossed state lines, federal charges were considered. Jason was the most severely punished, as he was on probation for a DUI from the previous year, which meant he violated the terms and was held without bail. While my parents managed to post bail the next day, Hallie called me sobbing. "How could you do this to us?" As if I were the villain for installing security cameras and reporting a crime. I coldly reminded her. "It was you who destroyed my grandfather's car, remember? You already tried to kill me once. It was Jason's idea. He was drunk and furious about Hawaii, and you just went along with it." At that precise moment, I felt the emotional ties with my family definitively break. Not when I moved away 5 years ago, nor when they left me at the airport, but when they destroyed what meant the world to me, all because I decided to stop being their ATM. The criminal charges forced them to hire expensive lawyers, which drained the little savings they had left after I stopped supporting them financially by helping them pay the mortgage and other bills. In a short time, problems began to accumulate. Mortgage arrears, calls from credit card companies, and even their country club membership was canceled for non-payment. Meanwhile, I filed an insurance claim for the car. I understood that it wasn't just about money. That car was irreplaceable and they knew it. In less than 6 months, my parents were forced to put their house up for sale. That same house they used to flaunt at every family gathering for its designer kitchen and newly renovated master bathroom, to which I had also contributed, ended up being replaced by a modest ranch house in an area they used to mock as unworthy of us. My mother had to part with her antique collection. Years of dedication turned into second-hand merchandise. And my father, retired for years, was forced to work as a security guard in the same mall where he used to buy his designer suits. My mother, who had never worked in her life, started selling multi-level marketing products on Facebook, desperately trying to maintain the appearance of having money. For their part, Hallie and Jason's marriage didn't survive. He served 6 months in prison for the vandalism, violating the terms of his probation, and once released, Hallie divorced him, supporting Frank's version that Jason had lost most of their savings in gambling. After everything that happened, the family fragmented irreparably. Most relatives sided with me, especially after seeing the evidence of what they had done. Even some who were initially neutral ended up condemning their actions. My Uncle Frank, meanwhile, became an almost father figure to me, calling me weekly and organizing family gatherings from which my parents were excluded. Over time, my relationship with Jake and his family, my aunts and uncles on my mother's side, strengthened considerably to the point that they stopped talking to my mother. About a year after the incident, I received an unmarked envelope. However, I immediately recognized my mother's handwriting. Inside was a 5-page handwritten letter in which she apologized, talked about having learned her lesson, and expressed how much they missed their son. The letter was imbued with religious references and the idea that family should stay together forever. I, however, returned it unopened, stamping on the envelope, "Return to sender. Address unknown." Some relationships, once burned, must remain in the past. A few days later, Frank called me and said, "Your mother says you don't even want to read her apology letter." I replied with a resounding, "Yes. And good for me," making it clear that the letter wasn't a true apology. I also found out that my father was bragging in his poker games that they had plans to make amends to get back in my good graces for financial support. That was the final confirmation that they hadn't changed. They only wanted their ATM back. Today my life has taken a different and much better path. All the money I used to spend on supporting them is now invested in my own projects like my travel fund. Tara recently moved in with me, and we're already talking about getting married next year. The insurance company paid me for the Mustang, and although I couldn't replace my grandfather's original car, I found another 1967 that I'm slowly restoring. It's not the same, but it's therapeutic to work on it, as if paying tribute to his memory. Although I occasionally hear news of my parents through the family grapevine, they say they've found a church that preaches family reconciliation, and claim I'm going through a phase. Hallie moved to Chicago after the divorce and practically doesn't communicate with them. Even my mother still tries to reach out through acquaintances when she needs money, but my response has been invariably, "Have a nice trip back, losers." It might seem petty, but it reminds me how far I've come and how much better life is without toxic people, even if they're family. The hardest part wasn't discovering that my parents could be so despicable, but accepting that I deserved better. Now I have it and I don't plan on looking back.